Okay, welcome everyone. Few announcements. So first of all, welcome to this first archive webinar about our strategy and especially focusing on our membership model. We'll start with a presentation from myself on the strategy side, and then my colleague Alison from me will continue explaining the membership model. If you have questions, please use the Q&A box. We will not probably be able to answer all the questions live, but we'll do our best to answer them in a form or another in the next few weeks. And also we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so we'll answer live at least some of them. And we'll also try to type. We have connected the entire leadership team of arXiv, so as soon as someone will find answers so that they can answer quickly, they will. So this is it, and we'll start now with my presentation about strategy. It's about 20-25 minutes presentation, and then Alison will take over. So I would like to talk about arXiv, but especially about the role that arXiv can play in the future of scholarly communication. First of all, I would like to kind of introduce ourselves. Who is arXiv? I know that many people kind of feel that arXiv runs a little bit by itself, but in fact there are many humans behind it. So we have a leadership team that is myself and Stein Sigurdsson, the scientific director. And then we have 4 main areas: communication and development, for which Alison is in charge. We have a new member of the arXiv team. In fact, Ellen Wang joined us as product manager just a week ago. So we are really exciting it's really exciting to have her here. And then we have the 2 main pillars really that hold arXiv together, which is technology and content. So Martin Leismaster is the head of technology, and with his team, they are in charge of everything that goes from the backend to what you can see when you connect on arXiv.org. And Jim works very closely with Stein on the content and user support, so author support, moderator support, and so on. Okay. And also I would like to spend a few words to explain the governance and in particular the relationship that arXiv has with Cornell. This is a question that has come up several times, so I want to make sure that it's that is well defined. So Cornell, arXiv is really part of Cornell. It's like we are a group within Cornell University. So we don't have like we are not legally registered as an independent organization, but we are part of Cornell. That means that the mission and strategy is defined in coordination with Cornell stewardship, in particular with Greg Morissette, who is the Vice Provost of Cornell Tech. And then Cornell also offers support in terms of fundraising support, administrative support, HR, financial help, and so on and so forth. arXiv staff is really in charge of executing the strategy and of the daily operations. So it goes from the technical and operational stability to partnership management with other organizations, content workflow, and so on. And we have 2 advisory boards that are helping us. One is a representative of our members and is composed mostly, but not exclusively, of librarians and research managers, and they advise on financial sustainability, interest of universities around the world, policies around open access, and scholarly communication policies in general. And the scientific advisory board is composed by a group of professors in various different subjects, representative of arXiv scope, and they provide a scientific oversight for arXiv content, and they also advise on the scope and content policies. Plus, they are directly involved in the organization of the subject advisory committees that are groups, again, of scientists, professors that curate the content of each subject area in arXiv. So the mission of arXiv has been the same forever. arXiv was launched 30 years ago, almost exactly 30 years ago. And in these 30 years, it's doing a very similar thing for the entirety of its time. So providing scientific research quickly and conveniently to researchers all over the world in open access and free of cost for the researchers. So that mission is fundamental, and it is something that is at the core of why arXiv exists and will continue always to be at the core of why arXiv exists. And the way it works, the way we achieve that is through this little loop in a way, right? So we have researchers that are doing the research, write their article, they submit it to arXiv. When it arrives to arXiv, there is a group of volunteer moderators that works together with using automated system to check submission for basic quality control. And they have, depending on when the paper is submitted, a maximum of 24 hours time to be able to check the papers. And then the papers go online at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And it's usually within 48 hours from when they are submitted. Even if there is a problem, usually it is always resolved in a couple of days. And then as soon as the paper goes online, the email listings started to be sent out. So during the night, all subject areas receive in a series all the emails of the new papers that were submitted during the day. And the interesting part about this is that for us, like this is what arXiv has been focusing on. But then in fact, what happens to those papers is much more. So papers are being used to talk about it, to do research groups. They are shared on social media. They are published. They receive citations. They allow their authors to proceed in their career and then create new research in that way. So in fact, what the workflow or the loop that papers go through is a circle, but arXiv has really focused only on one part of this circle. So the vision for arXiv is for the future is to become a hub for curated scientific content that is open, flexible, and interoperable. So that means that we want from now on to be much more aware of the rest of the loop that we haven't been looking at very closely. So what does it mean? It means that the scientific community will continue to send papers to arXiv in the same way that it has been doing till now. And the way that I like to think about it is to see arXiv as a sort of a market. So we have raw material that is already kind of curated a little bit, but it's not like that is not the same as a peer-reviewed journals, for example, but it's still enough to create this type of conversations and to be used for others. So once it is in an arXiv, it's really it can be used, it's throughable, and it can be used as a directly from arXiv or through others. So how do you do it? Well, I mean, arXiv is not the only, of course, repositories that does that. There are other archives, other repositories, data and software repositories. So authors are sending material both to arXiv and to all these other repositories. So it is essential for arXiv to become more proactive in having relationships with these other repositories, and then to work together with other organizations and services that are enriching content. So, for example, DataSite, ORCID, Arrow, and many others are kind of the kitchen, right? So they take the raw ingredients that are provided by repositories and they are adding value to it. And then there are services such as libraries, journals, aggregators, analytics that are really the restaurant. And they can go from, like a diner on the street to like a 5-star Michelin restaurant that costs a lot of money. That is a different, that all this is something that arXiv needs to be able to support. It is not arXiv job to be a restaurant, but we need to be able to provide all the ingredients for any type of open and flexible information sharing. And then, of course, those restaurants are serving the same scientific community, so the loop closes again. So this seems a rather simple vision in a way, right? It's not very different from what is already happening today, but it's just a little bit maybe more defined. So what does it mean in practice for arXiv to achieve that? So arXiv is like an empty box, and we have our core communities that are authors and readers, and we curate the relationship with them. And that is what arXiv has been focusing for 30 years in doing. Plus, now we wanted to start having more relationships with databases as well, like GitHub, Zenodo, Dryad, and more, and with enrichment services like ROR, ORCID, DataSite, OpenAir, and so on. And also with other preprint servers that can be bioRxiv, medRxiv, SocArXiv, but also, of course, institutional repositories and other type of repositories that contain content. And then when it is enriched through connection with ROR, ORCID, and so on, it can be delivered to service providers. So service providers, such libraries, journals, organizations that build metrics over papers, or recommenders, or aggregators, fancy search engines, they can use the information either directly from arXiv or sometimes getting it from those enrichment services like DataSite or Crossref. So what arXiv needs to do to facilitate all this? Well, and then of course I forgot to mention that it goes back to the authors, right? But so what arXiv needs to do all this, start with a very strong software architecture. This is fundamental for allowing for flexible growth. And then of course, being on the cloud to have a strong connection with, and also like a strong, to be operational in a way that is the same and is trustworthy across the entire globe. Have a very defined, well-structured data model that supports connections with databases, that supports connections with journals, with identifiers of different types. So data model is really kind of the center of all this. Then, of course, we need to continue developing web search, browse experience directly on arXiv to support our authors and readers. We need to also check the data quality. So is the how much metadata is missing? Is the metadata coherent with what is written in the full text? All these kind of observations. And then, of course, we want to continue and enhance services such as submission, moderation tools, and user support for curating the relationship with our core community. And then, of course, user management. And all these needs to be somehow organized in a strong API strategy that allows for communication and interoperability with all the other services. So as you can see, the original relatively simple image becomes much more complicated and much more difficult to realize once you kind of extract all the details of what is really needed. And in fact, the one thing that I think would be interesting to observe is what is it needed in terms of expertise, in terms of people, and of resources for arXiv to actually reach this vision that we have. So One aspect is author and reader support and moderation support, of course. So everything that has to do with submission, moderation, content management, and of course also operation and production of the archive record. This has both a technical and human interactions and human type of resources that are needed. And at the technical level, we needed to implement a new software architecture, develop a cloud strategy, a new data model, develop some data science for quality assessment of our data, develop better or newer submission and moderation tools, design APIs, and have a respectable search experience directly in the website. Even though we want, of course, support also other search experiences, it is important for users to be able to, come to arXiv and be able to do a search. And that also includes a lot of work from a more partnership management communication perspective. We have to have a stronger branding. This is something that we have already initiated doing. As you can see from these slides, we have a new logo, we have colors that we tend to use. And so this helps positioning arXiv together with all the other services that exist and the relationship with them. And then, of course, the delivery is also very important. This means having API support for all those services that are using our APIs to be able to offer the support they need, integration management, and so on. So that means that to achieve that relatively simple vision, it needs a complicated technical solution, and it also needs a lot of human resources to be able to manage this in the right way and in a way that really benefits the entire ecosystem. So some important consideration to keep in mind is that we cannot do that completely alone. So it is important that the community is on board and wants arXiv to actually play that role in the entire ecosystem of the scientific community. This means that the authors should really take care of the type of license that they are choosing when they are submitting a paper to arXiv. Of course, there are a lot of constraints. Different journals have different constraints regarding the type of license that they accept for the preprint version. There are certain funding bodies that they have require specific licenses, but still, I would really like to encourage all arXiv authors to think about how you want your work to be reused and redistributed by others. And for that, when possible, I would strongly advise to use one type of the CC BY type of licenses. We are now supporting most of the CC BY licenses, including the CC BY and CMD. That is one of the preferred licenses among many publishers. So I would really advise authors to think through whether they can choose any type of CC BY license. It would be our preference. And then another thing that the authors can do to help is to connect their papers with the data and software. And this can happen on arXiv, but it can also happen in other places. This is our job to work together with the repositories, with databases, with enrichment services that can provide this linking. But the authors, at the end of the day, are the ones that are providing both of these entities and are confirming that they are connected together. So it is really important for authors to be engaged in this type of work. And then finally, also the aspect of identity, like whose paper it is, to have a connection with the ORCID ID, with the ROR of your information, of your institution, adding funding and so on, are all things that would really benefit the entire ecosystem if they were added at the beginning during submission. So that's an encouragement that I just wanted to share with everyone. I'll also provide an example here of how we are moving in this direction. So, for example, in the last year, we have been working with the organization called Papers with Code. It's by far not the only one. We are also working with other organizations, but it was the first. And so I want to share as an example how this could work. When a paper is published on arXiv, is posted on arXiv, we can know if there was code associated with it, because Papers with Code checks on GitHub and checks for arXiv IDs and creates this connection and shares this connection with us. And authors can fix it if the connection is not correct, can add it if it was missed, can add it upon submission or afterwards, so after the paper has been posted, can do it on Papers with Code, on arXiv, on GitHub. The important thing is that the information is provided somewhere. And so this is particularly interesting as an example of how this type of interoperability could work. In the last year, so I joined arXiv about a year and a few months ago, in March last year. And so since the time I joined, I think that we did a lot of work that was mostly based still on the author and reader experience, because that, again, is really our central focus. But we started to look at a broader scale of the scholarly ecosystem. And so we worked also on reporting, for example, and on improving our data model to have better information on authorships and institutions associated to each paper. We launched arXiv Labs, that is a framework for community collaboration in which both individuals and organizations can contribute by building their best ideas for how to improve arXiv. And Papers with Code is one of those examples. And we started also working on the technology side, moving most of the arXiv services on the cloud, for example. But we have more things coming up. These are just a few, and there are many more that we can list. But this is already filling the slide pretty well to show that we have work coming up for the next couple of years. So in terms of the strategy, so how we want to actually reach the vision that we have is by focusing on enhancing the value that arXiv has always provided, meaning sharing articles quickly and freely for the scientific community, while also meeting the current need of the scientific community, which means that there are some aspects that needs to step up, like accessibility, like using or adopting DOIs, you capturing ORCID and ROR, and so on. So what we want to do is here on the left side, you see all the work that we are planning on doing in support of authors and readers and moderation. Then in orange, you can see the list of things that we are planning from a more really technical back-end perspective. And then you have the relationship management side and the delivery side. So a new API strategy, that's something that we don't have yet, but yeah, it's definitely higher in the priority that we needed to do. We want to have better support for conferences, for overlay journals and for journals in general. And of course, also capture, like ensuring that arXiv is compliant with open access mandates around the world as much as we can. So ensuring that we have DOI for arXiv records, that we capture the ORCID and ROR of authors, and that we can capture funding information. So these are some of the goals that we have really to manage to get to our vision and make it a reality. And this is all for my presentation. These are some of my information, my name and Twitter and email. Feel free to reach out or just follow arXiv news. We have a Twitter account, blog, a newsletter, and then status updates. So there are many ways to be in touch. So this is it. And I think what we want is to try to keep the question for the end. So I know, I imagine that you have many questions, but I'll give now the presentation to Alison, and then we will have a few minutes at the end for questions.
Good to see you all here. Thank you for being here. All right, I think you should be able to see my screen now. So thank you, Eleanor, and again, thank you everyone for being here and sharing your enthusiasm for arXiv. As Eleanor said, I'm Alison Frami, and I am the Communications and Development Coordinator for arXiv. Today, I'm going to be talking about arXiv's sustainability model and membership program. And I know that some people are kind of jumping in and out of this webinar, so I just wanted to start with the basics. I also know we have a really diverse audience. So again, I'm just starting with the basics. What is arXiv? It's not a journal. It's not a simple website. It's an open platform where researchers share and discover new, relevant, emerging science and establish their contribution to advancing research. arXiv includes these 8 main subject areas, and the first 3, physics, math, and computer science, make up the majority of content on arXiv. For nearly 30 years, arXiv has offered downloadable articles, the ability to share work quickly and digitally, and it has served as an archive for storing articles. It also offers a pathway to fulfilling open access mandates, and we're working to try to meet open access mandates around the globe. About 60% of the content is also found in journals, and it's important to note that arXiv does not do its own peer review. Instead, we have community-led moderation. Many readers and authors are enthusiastic about arXiv because arXiv supports the research lifecycle in a way that complements conventional journals. We see that researchers really need and want this speed and openness. Submissions to arXiv are increasing exponentially. In this chart, you can see that it starts over here at 1991 with just, a few hundred submissions, and it goes all the way to the present. And in this past spring, we reached 17,000 submissions in a single month. So, researchers can share works in progress in order to improve them for eventual publication, while at the same time staking their claim in a specific research area early in the process. arXiv also serves as a foundation for other services, as Eleonora mentioned, such as indexing services and overlay journals. So, I'm emphasizing here that arXiv supports the research life cycle and complements conventional journals. But to continue to meet this need, arXiv cannot coast. I mean, the status quo just won't work. You can see that there is no status quo with this increasing demand. So I'd like to ask a question. Who keeps arXiv open? And by open, I mean operational in addition to open access. And the answer is quite simple. It's you, the global research community. And more specifically, I mean authors who submit their work, readers who learn from and find value in the articles posted, the moderators and section area chairs, almost 200 volunteers representing at least 15 countries who check articles for baseline quality, the 30 advisors who make up the scientific advisory board and the member advisory board, 230 member universities, libraries, and research labs who share their expertise and funding. We have dozens of societies, organizations, and companies that offer funding, expertise, and sometimes developer time. We have more than 1,500 individual donors who donate during our giving weeks. We have a dedicated staff team of 13. And also the Simons Foundation, which has supported arXiv for many years with substantial funding. And of course, Cornell University and Cornell Tech specifically, which is the organizational steward of arXiv. So I just want to extend a big heartfelt thank you to this amazing community. arXiv was founded specifically for research and education, not profit. And as you heard from Eleanor's strategy presentation, arXiv envisions its future as a central hub for accessing open research, making its vast scientific content highly accessible and interoperable for the benefit of the community, and to maximize the impact of the research produced. You may have heard that arXiv is free, and while that's true for individual readers and authors, it's not free to operate. It's no secret that arXiv requires funding, and that's why we depend on the generosity of our community to stay open. So our financial sustainability depends on diverse, reliable, and community-based funding sources. Right now, our operating budget is $1.9 million, that's US dollars. And our funding comes from a mix of members, donations from different types of organizations, and our major funders. In the past, our funding was about 25% from membership, 60% from major funders, and 10% from other donations. And you can see that's not the pie chart that you're looking at. This pie chart is aspirational. So, but before I go into that, roughly 2/3 of the budget goes towards paying our staff and the remaining 1/3 to general expenses. You can find out more about how the funding is allocated by checking out our annual report, and you can see the address, the website address there at the bottom of the slide. So to achieve the future that we envision, we aim to increase our budget to $3 million in the next few years. This might seem like a big increase. However, when you consider that the demand for arXiv services is increasing exponentially, we can assure you that our budget will not increase exponentially, and we're making efficient use of our resources. Our increased funding target reflects the reality of what's required to keep up with the technology, user support, and managing relationships with related services and also our community. And that's why we're looking to grow the total size of this pie, as well as increasing the number of contributors to reflect and engage with arXiv's entire community. So our goal here is to distribute our operating cost fairly across the community, which is why we aim to have about 1/3 of our funding supplied by each of these 3 main groups: members, affiliates and sponsors, and major funders. So for nearly 10 years, member universities, libraries, and research labs and other organizations have supported arXiv. And again, for that, we're super grateful. Now, as arXiv has grown, the number and the types of organizations that we interact with has expanded greatly. And that reflects arXiv's interdisciplinary nature. So to welcome this diversity and encourage the entire arXiv community to contribute to our financial future, we worked with our member advisory board and arXiv's leadership team to expand our sustainability model and include 3 programs for specific types of supporters: members, which are universities, libraries, and research institutions; affiliates, which are societies, funding bodies, and nonprofit organizations; and sponsors, which are companies. And this is also with the goal of being transparent about where our funding comes from. So the rest of the presentation today focuses on membership. But before I get to that, I know our audience is very diverse, and for those of you in the audience who represent organizations that might fall into the sponsor or affiliate categories, I invite you to contact me directly at membership@arXiv.org. And I also want to address any of you who are just individual researchers wondering if this membership presentation has anything to do with you. And I'll say this, check to see if your institution is a member. You can see it on our about pages on arXiv.org. And if the answer is yes, please thank your librarian, because that's probably who's making the arXiv support happen. And please encourage them to renew or increase their support for 2022. And if your institution is not a member, we encourage you to discuss the possibility of membership with your library or your academic department. And we want to help you have this conversation. So if you need help, please do reach out. I'll also mention as a footnote that we do accept online donations at arXiv.org. And again, a big thanks to all the people who donated during our recent Giving Week in May. So, membership. The membership program was started about 10 years ago for 4 important reasons. The first is community investment. arXiv is a community resource started by and for scientists, and the membership program is a way to actively engage with our academic community beyond the researchers who use arXiv for submitting and reading. The second is the member advisory board, which meets several times a year to provide valuable insight into the scholarly communications landscape. The membership program also currently provides about 25% of the budget. Again, we're looking to increase this portion to about 1/3 while also increasing the size of the pie. And finally, membership contributions are matched by the Simons Foundation up to a cap. So member contributions go farther than the individual fees that are paid annually. There are a lot of benefits to membership, such as public acknowledgement on arXiv.org and also locally to the institution's website. We now also offer institutional submission statistics as well as annual reports, and members are eligible to serve in arXiv's governance. We want to emphasize that supporting arXiv helps scholars and aligns with your institution's values. First of all, with arXiv membership, you're funding a resource that your researchers already depend on. It's also budget conscious. A single year of membership is often less than article page charges for a single journal article or a single journal subscription. Membership is also low risk. arXiv has a 30-year track record of service. We're also non-commercial, and we believe that knowledge is for everyone. So as I mentioned, we updated our membership program, and so I just want to go into a little bit more detail about that. Most institutions will join or renew as standard members, and contributions for standard members are based on a 3-year average submission rank. And we have 3 tiers, 1,000, 2,500, and 5,000. The $5,000 level is for the top 100 institutions submitting articles to arXiv. The $2,500 level is for institutions that rank between 100 and 500. And the $1,000 level is for institutions ranking above 500. All these fees are contributed on an annual basis, usually invoiced in January, so the memberships are active for the calendar year. That said, some institutions are true champions of open access and open science and are thought leaders in this space, and they want to contribute more. And we encourage these institutions to consider contributing 10,000 or more. We have 4 members at this level right now, and which is very exciting. We also recognize that some institutions are just using arXiv for reading. and others are significantly resource limited. We still want these institutions to have an opportunity to be involved in arXiv. So for these institutions, we've created the community membership at $1,000 or an amount that fits their budget. Also, we're keen to develop agreements at the consortia or country level, and we offer discounts for doing so. If you are part of a consortia and can help start that conversation, please do let us know. Here on this slide, you can see what a handful of arXiv enthusiasts say about supporting arXiv. You heard our vision that arXiv as a central hub for accessing open research, highly accessible and interoperable, all for the benefit of the research community and maximizing the impact of the research. When your organization renews its membership or joins arXiv for the first time, you are becoming part of a global community that is driving the future of open science. And we hope you'll join us on that journey. I just want to close with a quote from our board member, Sumati Surya. "We can all have a voice and a stake in arXiv. It's very important, a fantastic forum, and we don't ever want to be at a point where it is privatized." Please do check out the membership information on our website and reach out to us with any questions. I see that there are a bunch of questions in the chat, so I am going to add Eleonora here and stop my screen share.
Yeah. So there are, thanks, Alison, for the presentation and opening the Q&A. So we answered a few questions already on the chat, but there are a few that I would like to address live. I'm going to go in order. So the first one that I see is that the discussion seemed to imply that arXiv focus on manuscripts. And so what do we think about the idea of manuscript as the main format of research output and whether we expect it to change? Well, so I can answer this from my personal opinion. So I personally think that that it will evolve, but that manuscripts, at least for now, remain kind of the central focus of how researchers are sharing their research. But of course, already today we see how the manuscript is really only the tip of the iceberg. So this is why it is super important for arXiv to start supporting connections with every other output of research and be flexible for accommodating changes when in the future, if they come. And actually, maybe I can answer also to a connected question, that is, any plans to support the deposition of dataset software and other non-conventional research output. So we do not have any plans about that, let's say, in the direct future. We are not actively supporting that, although we are now already supporting ancillary files, so people can add data or software or other type of material together with the paper. And we recently have expanded a bit also the size of the files that we support in that format. But the important thing is that what we are trying to do in our new architecture and data model is to be open to support these things if the future requires it. So being future-proof is really kind of the core of that. Let's see. Oh yeah, so the policy around the mirror sites. So we are still open and thinking about this. Because we are in a stage in which we are, as I mentioned, one really key part is to build a strong API strategy and understand how that can be leveraged. And also with the use of cloud resources, we will have a better way to serve people in every region of the globe at the same speed and with the same performances. So my suspicion is that the mirror sites will become a bit less relevant, but it's still something we are considering. So in fact, sharing your experience with mirror sites would help us understand also how they are used. Stein, would you like to answer live? There is one question you marked to answer live.
The thunderstorm kicked me off Zoom for a few minutes, about 10 minutes ago, and I can't see any questions that were posted before 1:39 because
Okay.
Zoom erases questions when you go out and then log back in again.
I'll read it to you.
Okay.
For the 40% that are of the articles that are not in journals, do they ultimately make it to peer-reviewed journals?
Oh yes, I think I was typing the answer to that question when my Zoom went down. So the answer is some of them do. The current record for a paper, the interval between a paper being submitted and accepted to arXiv and released and it appearing in a peer-reviewed journal was, I think, 11 years. It was a mathematics paper and it was published recently. So there's a lag. So we're always catching up on how many papers actually end up in journals. Some of them are not intended for journals. We include, for example, white papers, policy position papers that are solicited by funding agencies and governmental agencies in many cases. Those are generally not published as journal papers, and there are other types of content that is never intended for journals, but is still included in arXiv's matter policy. And then there's, for example, Perlman's paper that was just sent to arXiv, and it's on arXiv, and I gather there's no intent for it to be going to a journal because there's no need. And that is a small but increasing fraction of submissions. People put in arXiv and they're done. And that's okay.
Indeed. Yeah, thank you, Stein. Other questions? Oh yeah, there was a question about the average cost per paper, and I started to type a very long answer, and then I decided that is better if I just say it. So right now, if you really wanted to kind of look at it from that perspective, we have about 2 million papers on arXiv, and we have a budget of about 2 million. So it's approximately $1 per paper. But I think that while it is a good way to kind of have a ballpark idea, the reality is that the cost of running an organization don't necessarily scale linearly with papers. In fact, the majority of our costs right now, it is to make the infrastructure scalable. What you want is to create an infrastructure that can support an exponential growth of papers without a linear cost associated with it. So in a way, instead of having a linear growth, you have maybe a higher investment at the beginning because you have to build the infrastructure and you have to hire the right people and so on. But then it becomes much more sustainable in the long term.
There was also a question about the submission data that membership fees are based on. It. It's asking, are raw data from Microsoft Academic available? You know, the data might not be correct, and this is very important because they're the basis of future membership payments.
Yeah, do you want me to answer, or you answer? What do you prefer?
You can go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So we decided to use Microsoft Academics initially because it was, well, I mean, to be completely honest, because it was available, and they have been collaborative. Unfortunately, kind of in the process of while we were using it, they decided to suspend the product altogether. So now we don't even really know what happens with Microsoft Academics. And then when we started to share the data with our members, we realized that there were indeed some errors. We were using the Microsoft Academics APIs, so we didn't have much control on the underlying data. And then after that, this was done, we got access to the actual database, and our engineering team has spent a few weeks really kind of debugging Microsoft Academics, and we realized that they were counting a few things wrong. So now we have a copy of it, and we are kind of improving the understanding of what it is. But for the future, we are looking for another solution. In the long term, what we want is to really rely on our own data. So be able to capture ROR and ORCID is a really kind of essential step for that. But as a bridge, I mean, even if we could capture that today, it would take some time for authors to start getting used to it. So we are in the meantime looking for a bridge solution for the next 1 or 2 years to see, yeah, where we can get the best data available. And yeah, maybe one thing to mention is that recording affiliation data is really hard. It's very easy to, of course, ask people to type some institution, but the institution names are so variable. People write on the department, people write the full name of the university, or they write it in the local language, or they write it in English, they write a different, like an acronym. So like the work that you need to do to understand that the text that the author wrote really correspond to the name of an institution and at what level of the institution that corresponds, it's really not something that is easy to achieve. And that's why we hope to rely a lot on ROR.
There's a question about how does arXiv plan to deal with competition in labs integrations? For example, what happens if a service competing with Papers with Code or any other integration wants to integrate with arXiv?
Let's see.
Do you want to take that one?
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So I think that the point of arXiv, what I'm really trying to convey is that the arXiv should be like a, yeah, I like the word hub. I don't know if it is the right way to describe it, but it's like a thing in the middle. That's why I use the little market, because we don't really create unique connections with special organization, and that's it. If like we work with Papers with Code because they reached out and it worked out, but we are also talking with Code Ocean, for example, and we are also talking with Dryad, and we are also talking with that site, and we are very happy to have multiple multiple connections. That's why we created the arXiv Labs framework, is really to facilitate this type of open interoperability. But I acknowledge that there is some more work to do in that direction. But the idea is really to create like a very easily plug and play object at the center of the internet, in which you can both plug in content and you can get it and reuse it for the most optimal use for the community. I hope it addressed that. Yeah, so there is also a question about that says, while arXiv papers are not peer reviewed, the posting of a paper by arXiv inevitably provides that work with the imprimatur of authenticity, I cannot read, and respectability. Yeah, so how are we going to deal with the tacit approval of research that arXiv provides? So I think that that is also something that maybe in a bit of a less direct way, but it is what we are trying to address with working and with creating this platform that is interoperable for services. Because then we can work with services that can be of any nature. Of course, we would probably work more closely with organizations that are aligned with our mission and with our vision. But at the end of the day, we put the data available. And when people are smart and can build things on top of it, they can just do it. So the idea is to create an infrastructure that allows for decision making at the end of it. So you will have services that maybe provide metrics over archive papers, that maybe provides ways to explore it and cite it in different ways. So what I think it is important for us is to understand that arXiv is not the end of the journey, it's just the beginning, and we need to kind of facilitate that.
It looks like we're already at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, we still have a lot of questions. I think we'll try to, address them in the next, I don't know, days, weeks, maybe through social. Maybe we'll have a blog post. So try to keep in touch. And if there are particular questions, feel free to reach out directly. Yeah, and hopefully we will have more occasions to be in touch with our community like this.
Yeah, we're so grateful for all of you who spent your time with us today.
Thank you, everyone.